Hey all, one of the more recent topics in the RPG Brigade Facebook group goes back a few weeks was meaningful deaths. And I've listened to Ivan's response and a few others, and there was a decent amount of just text conversation in Facebook. But I thought I would, and I said something there, but I thought I'd put a little bit more out here. As some other people also said, my position on this is that there really isn't a meaningless death. If you go back to my RPG a day video, I think it is number 2 or 3, the best session I've had this year. The most interesting session I had that year was actually one in which my wife's first PC was killed. It's running Rollmaster system. An opponent got a critical, got an open-ended roll, got a high-level critical, and killed her. And I talk about in that video what came out of that and what made that not bad. Even though we were actually in the middle of starting like her personal storyline quest, if you will. And that sounds absolutely horrible, but I say go watch that and hear the full description of what I say about how we all felt about that, including my wife. And we don't get every story the way we want. If you want a story to go exactly the way you want, my opinion, go write a book. That for me, I stand on this pretty hardcore. This is one of the reasons why we call this a role-playing game. There's some game, there's some amount of chance in this. Not all games involve chance, chess for example. So anyways, I mean, it was an unexpected death. It was unplanned. I was actually the first one who said, I don't really want to keep this result. But it was still really good. If your player character has character and a future and goals and desires and a past, their death won't be meaningless. Their death will have meaning. Their death will mean something in the story. It won't always be the story that you were expecting, but it will be. So if your PC death would really feel meaningless, I don't remember who said this in the RPG Brigade group, but then maybe you need to really kind of create more character in your character. Though I will, as a second point to this, and I think Mike was talking about this, there's a difference as well between a meaningful or meaningless death and an epic or mundane death. And maybe that's part of the difference. Maybe some people say, well, I guess you can't have a meaningless epic death. Maybe you can. I'm sure someone will come up with an example. But most epic deaths are going to be in the middle of an epic fight or something important. But yeah, so maybe if someone wants to say like I want my deaths to be epic, I feel like that's saying that I want all my deaths to have a large meaning and not simply be part of the tapestry of the story you're weaving. Dwarf Fortress, the video game, and RimWorld were both described. RimWorld, because it's inspired by Dwarf Fortress, was described as a story-generating game. It didn't have a preset story, but it randomly generated a world, a setting with gods and cities and cultures and civilizations, and would in the process of generating the world would have them rise and fall, and I feel like that's kind of what you're doing in a role-playing game, which I guess that's exactly what we're talking about. You don't have that control over everything, so sometimes the story kind of weaves as well as you do. I described it somewhere else as saying, talking about all the actors, all the story contributors at the table, which included the players, the GM, and the system. And as a corollary, the third part, and then I'll cut this off. I feel like it's already gone too long. Personally, I don't really approach role-playing games or any kind of gaming for that matter as escapism. I approach it as relaxation, but not escapism. I don't, in general, value the concept of escapism much. Sorry, I don't. I don't have the hardest life in the world, and maybe that's why I don't feel that way. So when people want to avoid these kinds of things, I just don't. I'm not dissing anybody who wants to do that. I don't connect that way, and I feel like I've babbled a lot there, and I might cut everything, a whole lot of what I just said out. But so that's my thoughts about meaningless or meaningful PC deaths. NPC deaths are a whole other thing, but not even gonna touch on that. But anyways, see you guys around. Hope to play some games.